Very much looking forward to this conversation right now. There is a phenomenal book a lot of people have been talking about on the band Van Halen. It's called Running with the Devil. It's out now. It is written by Noel Monk with Joe Layden. Noel was Van Halen's manager, started out as their tour manager in 1978, and stayed with the band as their personal manager right through the 1984 tour and all the David Lee Roth years. And Noel Monk joins us live now here on Trunk Nation. Noel, how are you? This book is absolutely phenomenal. I had a chance to read it, every page of it, and I enjoyed every page of it. And my audience has been talking about it since the moment it came out. And for you, I guess the place to start, Noel, is that it seems like you waited almost 30 years to write this book. Why did you wait that long? Was there a legal issue around that before you could write it?
No, basically, I spent a lot of time doing other projects, but in 1990, when I did 12 Days on the Road, the Sex Pistol book, I decided that I'd do a Van Halen book, and I started writing stories and collecting stuff. I mean, I had thousands of pages and hundreds of files, and so over the years, I would go through all of them. And I finally found Joe Layden, who was a brilliant writer. I can write. He can really write. He is the absolute perfect writer who I was looking for. So it was just the right time. I had a great book company, HarperCollins, and it literally took us, Joe and I, about 3 years to put it together.
There's tremendous detail in the book and tremendous stories, and I was going to ask you about that as well. Did you keep a lot of journals and a lot of notes and logs during your time? Because, I mean, as detailed in the book, it was some wild times. Did you write notes, or do you have a tremendous memory? How did you recall everything?
I've got a good memory, but my wife would tell you that she wanted me to throw the 117 boxes out. I mean, I've been carrying around, I have all my Fillmore notes. I have Mike plots from Janis Joplin, The Dead, The Doors, The Airplane. I never throw anything out, Eddie. It's just, you know, and it's always worked for me. With the Pistol book and with this book, everything is backed up. But I was going through hundreds of pages. And you know, my secretary's notebooks and my notebooks and all the legal files. It was a real mammoth job.
Well, it paid off because this book is absolutely incredible, and we should tell people that don't know your story. You were predominantly a tour manager. You had been for many years working with some of those bands that you mentioned, and that's where you started with Van Halen as well. And Noel, what I found interesting is that you were hired essentially by Warner Brothers, Van Halen's label. Van Halen was kind of dropped in your lap to tour manage. You didn't really know much about the band, and you were really kind of working for the label initially when they were first introduced to you to be their tour manager. And I found that kind of interesting because back then in 77, 78, during that time frame, did record labels traditionally hire tour managers? Because that's not the way it is today, but is that the way the business was then, or was that kind of a unique situation?
No, basically, they hired tour managers. When I did the Sex Pistols, Carl Scott, who was the VP of Artist Development, said, "No, I can't find anyone to do this tour." I said, "I want to do it." We were independent contractors who took bands out on the road. I did lighting, I did sound, I did all of that. I did the booking and whatever they needed. And the record companies didn't have tour managers on staff. And they hired us for a phenomenally low fee. And we would take their bands out on the road.
Well, I guess the difference is, and where that would make sense at that period of time would be the fact that today, of course, unfortunately, records don't sell and the records are really just promotional tools for the tour. But back then, it was really about touring to sell the record. So it would make sense that Warner Brothers or whatever label would hire you to tour manage the band, because they needed to make sure things ran smoothly out there, because that's their investment, and their return is going to be when they see the record start to sell. That would be the model at that time, right?
That's exactly right. I couldn't say that any better.
Well, when you first tell me about your impressions, because you actually talk about in the book that you met with Van Halen and talked about them going out on their very first tour, but you had not even really heard their music. So you met the guys and got ready to get them out on the road, because the music at that point was pretty much irrelevant to you. You just had to do your job no matter whether you liked it or not, right?
You could do my interview. That's exactly right, Eddie. I didn't care what they sounded like, what they looked like. All Carl wanted me to do was break them as an act. And so, no, I never heard their music before I got to Chicago. And like you said, it didn't matter to me. It was a job.
What were your impressions? Share with the audience if you can. When was the very first time you heard their music?
Chicago, first show in the Aragon Ballroom. I did every show in 78 with them. I was on the road for 8 or 9 months. It was a very grueling tour. I mean, we'd get maybe 2 or 3 days off before they'd fly us to Japan. But our 10-day, which is a sales report, was doing so well. Normally, the bands I took out lasted 3, 4, 5, weeks. You know, and in 3, 4, or 5 weeks, you know whether they're going to sell. And Van Halen took off like a rocket because they were brilliant. One of the absolute best stage shows I'd ever seen. And they never did a bad show, except the US Festival. You pay us too much money, we will screw it up. But no matter what substances they were under, they always performed. I mean, Eddie is a genius guitar player. You know, he doesn't make mistakes. And David is one of the greatest frontmen I ever dealt with. Anyone that can jump off a drum riser 15 feet and do a split and land like a gymnast, name me another one who can even come close to that. David spent hours and hours of time before a show stretching so he wouldn't pull ligaments and tendons. And you always hear about football players who, you know, pull muscles. Well, David, for an hour and a half before a show, stretched. And he never missed a night of stretching. He was an incredible worker. And he had great raps. Okay, he didn't have the, you know, Adele's voice. But that wasn't what Van Halen was about. He had the perfect voice for Van Halen.
That initial tour, Noel, you guys were third billed to Ronnie Montrose in the middle slot and Journey as the headliner. Is that correct?
You got it. But that was the first 2-3 months of the tour. After that, we opened for the Sabbath crew, which was a great bunch of guys. I mean, we really got along with Sabbath very well.
But it's also well documented, and I think a lot has been discussed about the fact that you guys opened for Sabbath at a time where the wheels were starting to come off for Black Sabbath. So it's been widely reported that Van Halen really really torched them pretty much every night, that it was a hard act for Sabbath to come on after. Was that your assessment being out there in those early years as well?
I would say nobody could follow us and be comfortable. I mean, Ted Nugent had us on for one show. And afterwards we heard that he would never have us open for him again. I mean, he was totally blown off the stage. Ozzy, I'm sorry, he could carry his own, but like I said, we were a brilliant stage act, always were, through our whole career.
And during that Sabbath tour, did you not have an instance? Was there something where Sabbath canceled, or there was an issue, and then you guys stepped up and played the full set and had to come back? If you can recount that story.
It's simple. I mean, everyone tells it. Anyone who wasn't there tells it and tells their version, which I love. I love hearing stories from people who weren't there and never met the band, because they give it a whole different outlook, total ineptitude. But what happened was we got to Memphis, and we got to the show, and the promoter comes up and says, "We have a problem. After you go on, we'll talk about it." I said, "Okay." So we went on and did our set, and Albert, who was their road manager, great guy, said, "No, Ozzy's missing." I said, "Well, you mean like we can't find him?" He said, "You're very smart. Yes, we can't find him, no." I said, "Well, that's a problem. I'm glad we did our set, and we can get out of here." And this little weasel of a promoter, I really wanted to smack in the mouth. He comes up to me and he says, "Listen, Noel, we really need your help." I said, "Well, David can't dress like Ozzy." He said, No, that's not it. We want you to go on stage, not with David, but just with Ed, Al, and Michael, and vamp, while we come out and announce that Ozzy will not be able to play. I'm thinking, you blank mother blank.
You can curse here, Noel.
I said, "No problem. We'll be there." So I went back to the dressing room. I said, "Guys, get your clothes on. Let's get out of here." I said, "This promoter is crazy. He thinks I'm going to put my band out there to get murdered." I really wanted to break his neck, but we headed back to the hotel. And then he and everyone were sitting, not the band, they all went to their room and did what they were doing. And there was no Ozzy. It was a Hyatt house. We stayed at a lot of Hyatt houses. And no Ozzy, and they're hypothesizing that, he was kidnapped, murdered. And you knew Ozzy. I knew Ozzy long before that tour. And you didn't mess with Ozzy. No one was going to grab Ozzy. Ozzy was a tough English kid. So I figured he crawled up in a corner somewhere and went to sleep. But, there was nothing I was going to do. So about 5 o'clock in the morning, Albert called me and said, "No, we found Ozzy." I said, "How'd you find him? What table was he under?" He said, "No, we were at a Hyatt yesterday, and he got here and he was really tired, and he took his room key out from yesterday and looked at the number and went to the room, and the maid was making up the room, and he said, "Can I?" She said, "Yeah, go on in." So I went in and got in the bed, and he went to sleep. He was tired. And so he woke up about 5 and said, "When are we going on?" I said, "Albert, I'm glad you found him." Somehow I suspected that Ozzy wasn't beat up. Anyone that messed him would have gotten beat up. But, so that's what happened in that story. I've heard 19 versions of it, but most of the stuff that I was there for is, totally warped. The stories are funny to me. And that was one of the reasons I did the book. I was so sick of hearing all the bullshit that was starting to come out. And I'm sure now everyone's going to write a book. And I lived with this band. I lived with them for 7 years. I was with them every day. I was on 95% of the shows. And you take the paternity suit insurance. I mean, that story you can still, Eddie, you can still take it and Google it. And there's a long story about how now Dave is not protecting his penis. He's protecting his balls. And I'm going, wow, they've taken this for 30 years. And what actually happened was after Edward got a paternity suit, which I went into, David came to me in the office in 81 and said, no, I got to get paternity insurance. I said, how much do you want, David? Oh, I want $1 million. I said, oh, that should be easy. He said, come on, Noel. You can do anything. I said, yeah, okay. So I called around, and I finally called Lloyd's of London, and they did what you did. They laughed. They said, oh, sure, no problem, but call us in a couple years. They weren't going to do it. So Dave and I figured, hey, it's a good story. Let's put it out. So
well, the
Dave
story,
insurance.
The story, Noel, about the paternity insurance, and you just touched on it, the story in the book about Eddie being concerned about a paternity case against him is legendary, and I want to use that as a little bit of a teaser because we got to go into a break here, and we'll come back and we'll continue the conversation because there's a bunch more stuff I'd love to touch on in this amazing book. Again, the book is called Running with the Devil. Noel Monk is its author with Joe Layden. It is a backstage pass to the wild times, loud rock, and the down and dirty truth behind the making of Van Halen from a guy who was there every step of the way in the glory years of David Lee Roth, Noel Monk, who's joining us now live on the phone line here on Trunk Nation. So let's take a break right now. Noel, if you can hang through that break, we'll come back. We got a lot more to get into, a lot more I want to cover in this book with Noel. We'll come back with more right after this. Our second and final hour of Trunk Nation on this Thursday. We are live, Sirius XM 106 volume, being joined by Noel Monk, who is the author of the book Running with the Devil, along with Joe Layden. And Noel was the manager of Van Halen during the original David Lee Roth years, for a good portion of it at least. And that's where I actually want to pick up some of this conversation. There's so much to cover here with Noel, and he's been very generous to give us a good amount of time here to discuss it. But Noel, what I find interesting is we touched on this in a little bit. You started out as the band's tour manager. You had a big history as a tour manager and a great amount of experience doing that. The guy who actually managed Van Halen, though, in the first year or two while you were their tour manager was a guy by the name of Marshall Burrell. And you talk about in the book how he showed really a great level of disinterest in Van Halen, even with all the immediate buzz about the band, about how good they were, about how special they were, the live shows, the record, how much Warner Brothers was hyped about the prospects of this band. I found it really bizarre that a guy who would be lucky enough to be the manager would show such sort of disinterest. Why do you think that was? Did you ever sort of figure that out?
I could never figure that out. You got to be a brainless idiot. Of course, I'm not talking about him. But how could you possibly not be on the road with this act that is gold and platinum and disrespect him? I mean, what he did was phenomenally stupid. And I have no answer for you, Eddie. I really don't. I don't understand it. I'm a stupid guy. What can I say? All I know is, I love these guys. I wasn't looking to be their manager. I was a really brilliant tour manager. I poured Southern Comfort for Janis Joplin. I love rock and roll. Managers to me were mostly a pain in the ass because they didn't know what they were doing, especially with new bands. But I want to say just one thing, Eddie. Can I just say one thing?
Of course, yeah.
One of the major reasons I wrote this book, because yes, the business is turned on its head. Selling millions of records and doing it in the 80s and 90s way is turned on its head to how it's done now, making money selling tickets.
Right.
But we had the greatest fans, and still do, in the world. Without our fans, no Van Halen, no any band. And I wrote the book a lot for the young bands, just to let them know what you do not do unless you want to destroy your career. This is a book that is not just talking about a band. It's talking about how you handle yourself in the business. You want to get screwed up and messed up and party and take all the money. My book tells two things: what happened and what you shouldn't do. And I want the young bands out there to recognize that. That's all I want to say.
That's a great point, because for me, the one of the big takeaways from this book, having been a Van Halen fan since the beginning, one of the big things that kind of was surprising is I always knew of Van Halen being the party band. They were the ultimate party rock band, and they certainly projected that. And when you went to the shows, you certainly felt that, and the music, a lot of it encapsulated that as well. But one of the things that I was surprised is just how much that party really existed backstage. I mean, there's a lot of bands that some of it's smoke and mirrors. What you paint throughout this picture is these demons were really deep-seated with Van Halen. The drug use and the alcohol was really a big, big issue almost right from the very start, wasn't it?
Well, Eddie, yes. And, Eddie, we also had girls. And there's another misconception about the women on the road. Everyone talks about them as groupies and sluts and whatever. You don't have a band if you don't have those wonderful women who follow the bands. You would have a bunch of frustrated guys, some women who are out there, and it wouldn't work. These women are wonderful and always treated the band with respect. And, the attitude that a lot of people have towards groupies sucks. These women were essential to an act. And we partied more than any band I ever saw, and it was nonstop. And some of it was the devil, and some of it was a lot of fun. We had great hookers in Paris. Come on. We had the finest wines. We had a blast. And yes, we screwed up. We overdid it. We didn't see what was coming, and it changed us very quickly. And there was nothing I could do, Eddie.
Well, that's where
you take him to a intervention, and I go,
right.
What, are you out of your mind?
Well, that's why that's what I wanted to ask you, because you said we. You used the term we there a lot. And I know that reading this book, you had your fun here and there, but you were nowhere near as caught up in the partying scene as the band you were managing. But that's something that is an interesting point, Noel, is that this is a band. When you read through this book and you read how into drugs and alcohol and partying they had become and how dependent they became on it, there wasn't really, you didn't see any opportunity to really put this thing at full stop and say, okay, I got to get these guys cleaned up or I'm going to lose them.
No, it became evident by 81 that it was heading in the wrong direction. I had been out with a lot of bands, and there was no way that people say, well, why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you make it? For one, I'm no bloody angel. And no, I could not do nearly what they did in drinking and drugs. But I'm also not a hypocrite. I was drinking with rockers. I was hanging with the Grateful Dead in '68. This is not like a big surprise to me. But the amount that took over did shock me. It was like cold water in my face. This had to be somehow curtailed, and there was no way. It wasn't happening.
And of course, as the band got so successful so quickly, the jump from Van Halen 1 to Van Halen 2 was gargantuan, just in terms of how quick the success came. And anyone knows that with that success, getting a hold of those substances, those sort of people start hanging around. It intensifies. And I would imagine because Van Halen got so big so quick, the stuff kept coming in, and that part of it intensified right on with the success of the band.
I saw Eddie's private dealer, and I used to go out there really busting heads on bootleggers. And I saw him out there actually dealing to some of the kids in the audience, and he was always around for Eddie. And I really wanted to clock this guy. And I thought, no, he's just going to end up finding a dangerous dealer. It's not going to go away if you beat the shit out of this guy and throw him off the tour. Some another sleazy dealer will take his place. Everything that we handled, it was the five of us, and we handled it together. A lot of it was uncontrollable. A lot of it was controllable. And a lot of it we did very well with. I mean, our stage act was so great. And nobody ever came close to David and Edward. I mean, the backing band, Michael had a beautiful voice. He's a good bass player. The drummer, you didn't need him. You had him because you were stuck to him like super glue because he was Ed's brother. And being Ed's brother was a trial and tribulation for Al. Because what if your older brother was a genius guitar player and you were not a bad drummer? And being not a bad drummer is very different from being hailed as the greatest ever.
Right.
And usually with a band like this, you got Dave, and see, without Dave or Ed, you don't have Van Halen. Because no one's going to be jumping off that drum riser, or we'll end up in the hospital quick. And anyone can fill in as drummer and bass player. Although Michael was a sweetheart, really nice guy. They stuck it to him, which was the worst thing I'd ever seen, frankly. They really stuck it to him. And
well, let me ask you. Yeah, I mean, I know we're kind of jumping around a little bit here, and this is all great stuff. But Michael Anthony is of the original four guys in Van Halen, by far actually the only guy I truly know, and he's a friend, and I love him to this day, and I see him and talk to him all the time. He is one of the nicest, one of my favorite people in the world, to be honest with you. And when I read this book, and I don't know Dave or Eddie or Alex. I interviewed Eddie once, the one record they did with Sharon. That was the only opportunity. As you know, Van Halen, especially these days, are very, very, very tight-lipped. You don't really get much from them. But the way you painted Michael Anthony, even in these early years, did not surprise me in the least, because that is exactly the type of guy that I would expect him to have been. And you talk about it quite a bit. I mean, it really bothered you because they really stuck it to him when they presented him a contract which cut him out of all the publishing when the band originally was all equal. Is that correct?
Yes, but they didn't just cut him out. But you can do that. You can say, well, okay, we're changing our deal. But they did it in the middle of the 84 tour after the record was done. And they said, you're out of the royalties for 84. Well, wait a minute. That record's out. He lost millions. If he had done what I wanted him to do, he could have gotten out of it. But Michael never came to me. Ed, Al, and Dave always came to me. Al came to me with his big pink elephants coming out of the wall. But I would have told Michael, tell him to shove it. Tell them you're taking a vacation tonight. They won't be able to go on without you. And tell them you're not going to lose millions and millions of dollars because you're going to sign away your rights. It disgusted me. I mean, I've seen disgusting things. And as bad as you can get. Why Michael allowed it to happen? You got to tell me, Eddie. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I never will. Michael and I never discussed it. He never even came to me. And you see in the book what they did to him.
Were there ever Noel, I want to ask you about two things around that. Was there ever a time that, at least on your radar, that they had considered replacing Michael in the band? Because I've had Billy Sheehan on my show, and he's talked about, I don't know if it was before or after your time with the band, that there were overtures for him to join Van Halen more than one time. And there was also a rumor for a while that Eddie Van Halen actually, when things got bad, wanted to leave his own band and join Kiss. Is there any truth to either of those?
I've heard all that bullshit. I never crossed my desk. And a lot of musicians, want you to think that, I was going to be in Van Halen. When Van Halen broke up in '85, they never came back together again. When they did, they were old men. I mean, David can't jump. David wears a suit now and a hat to cover his bald head. There was no Van Halen after that. There was a Van Sharon and a Van Hagar and a Van Uzi, but without Eddie and Dave, and this is my opinion, a lot of people say, I think anyone is great. But maybe Sharon wasn't so good. But I don't think anyone captured Van Halen the way Eddie and Dave did. And as far as, I've seen some Malloy guy who's got a big story about how he almost was interviewed for a job. Well, who gives a shit that you almost got a job? Who gives a shit that Eddie might have said to someone wasted, I'm going to go to Kiss? All that bullshit I never heard at the time. I heard about everything, Eddie. And I'm sick of hearing everyone, I was going to be in the band. And they were going to toss out so-and-so to put me in. or Eddie was going to do. Bullshit. You know, the same bullshit as David has his paternity insurance. It's that same insurance is what these guys say, oh, I was offered to be in the band. If you were, I didn't hear about it, and I would have heard about it. You want to build yourself up a little bit and say you did an interview with the band? Great. I read the story. You know, it's fluff. You want to make yourself part of Van Halen? You should have been there in 78, otherwise you missed out.
Well, no, I get, and there's a lot of people that feel the way you do about that original version of the band, and for my money, those records, especially those first four, to me are untouchable. But it does seem that you, whether you like the period of the band or not, discount the what came with Sammy Hagar a little bit, because it is undeniable that they did tremendous business with Sammy and had a ton of hits and sold a ton of records with him. That was not a flash in the pan thing. So did that surprise you? I mean, I know you weren't the manager of the band at the time, but did it surprise you to see that Van Halen? Because the other thing that's telling about that is with 1984, they introduce keyboards and they start to go into this more melodic direction. You yourself throughout the book talk about the limitations of David. For as much of a brilliant frontman he is, the limitations as a singer that he had. So now Sammy comes into this band. Eddie's already going in a melodic direction and bringing in keyboards, and now he's got a powerhouse singer that can sing anything. Yes, it's different from David Lee Roth, but that pairing yielded a ton of hit singles and sold a ton of records. Different band, I get it, but did that surprise you that they were able to do that?
I don't think they did it. I mean, I looked at the figures, and they didn't become what they could have become had Van Halen stayed together. If we had stayed together by 88, we would have been the biggest band in the world playing stadiums. But when David left, they couldn't do stadiums. They sold half the amount of records with this new guy. And anybody who, even a Sharon, can call themselves Van Halen. But it ain't so. The big show was with David. And yes, he's got a nice voice. And, he's respectable, Hagar is. But, they're making it out as this is another Van Halen. I don't buy it. It didn't make nearly half the money that they made that we did. They didn't laugh. They fight. They're all at each other's throat. Who's going to be with who? Who's going to throw out Michael? And Hagar wants to be with David so he can cement his Van Halen-esque pile of shit.
We got to take a break, and there's still some more stories I want to get into with Noel Monk. Again, Noel was the manager of Van Halen, 78 through 85, and he tells so many amazing stories in his book, Running with the Devil, which is out right now. Noel, if you can hold through this break, a few more things I'd love to hit you with as we continue talking about this incredible period in rock history with Noel Monk here on Trunk Nation, Sirius XM, 106 volume. Eddie Trunk coming right back with more. Back with Noel Monk, former manager of Van Halen and author, along with Joe Layden, of the new book, Running with the Devil, which is out and available now, telling the incredible story of Van Halen from 78 to 85, Noel's years with the band. Noel, I want to pick up the conversation with something we touched on.
Just one thing.
Yeah.
If and I listened to your show. It's a great show. You were a great guy to interview with, and I was looking forward to it. But
Thank you.
When I've been on, you haven't played anything but classic Van Halen. I haven't heard any Hagar or Sharon. When I listen
why
to
would
80s, exactly.
That wasn't your period. That's not what we're talking about.
All right, but still, you would think that you'd play one if you're talking about Van Halen. No.
Well, we'll play one for you if you want into the next break.
I don't need to. I don't know what they are. It's okay. You don't have to bore me. But listen, if you listen to the classic 80s station, for every 10 Van Halen songs, you get a half a Hagar song. Come on, be reasonable.
No, well, again, if you want one, we'll definitely make sure we get one in for you before we wrap up.
Send me the catalog. I missed it.
All right, you got it. So what I wanted to ask you about, Noel, was we touched on this before, the paternity insurance that Roth wanted. But what I found interesting, and there's an unbelievable story in the book, and I'd like you to tell it, about Eddie Van Halen coming to you around the time just after he met Valerie Bertinelli, and he had a paternity concern which you quickly found out had no basis of truth to it. Please elaborate on that story and tell the audience that story from the book if you can.
Eddie, it wasn't so quick. I wish it was. Actually, we got papers from the Riverside District Attorney, and this woman was saying that Eddie had a child by her, and she wanted to get paid, and all this. This is not lightweight stuff. Eddie was getting married pretty soon, and at that point, Ed came. I said, "Yeah, we got a problem, Ed." He said, "Well, what do we do?" I said, "Well, I think we better get rid of it." He said, "No, please, you got to help me." I said, "Okay, who is she? What happened?" He said, "Well, she had a beautiful face. I loved her. She gave the best blowjobs ever." I said, "Well, that's good. Nothing wrong with that." He said, "But I never fucked her." I said, "Okay, well, that's going to make it hard." He said, "Now, you're sure if she gave me a blowjob that I couldn't have gotten her pregnant?" I said, "Ed, to my knowledge, it couldn't have happened that way." He said, "Well," I said, "if that's the way it went down," and Eddie never lied to me, it was a very straight shooter. Well, he did tell a couple of fibs. Like, "I love you. I want you to be my manager." But basically, I said, "Then we got no problem." So they then said, "Okay, we want a DNA test." And I said, "Ed, we got to do it." He said, "No, I don't want to do it." Now, weeks are going by. I said, "You don't want a woman with a baby when you're walking up the aisle." He said, "No, that wouldn't be good." I said, "No, Val would be really unhappy." And I said, "But that's the way it went down." He said, "I love a beautiful face in my crotch." And, and I said, "Okay, take it. Now I believe you." So he took the test, and he wasn't the father. But if you think it was wham bam, happened in a few days, you're wrong. We were rather scared. But when I heard him tell me that, I believed him, and there was no problem, Eddie.
There's a point in the book, Noel, where you describe Van Halen as a DEA band, which stands for drugs, ego, and alcohol. And you also say in the book, I found something interesting very early on when it came to David Lee Roth. You said David Lee Roth at best was challenging, at worst sociopathic. Was there ever a point when you got involved with these guys and saw these things come on so quick? It would manifest itself throughout the book in them destroying hotel rooms and ringing up unbelievable amounts of damage. Was there ever a point where you felt like I got to get out of this, that you were just going to walk away one day and bail on it? Or did you say, no, I'm going to see this through right to the end? Obviously you did, but I mean, did you come close to walking away?
Never. This was my band, and I've seen a lot of bands do better trashing. Not many. Micah was a master at taking food and making food murals in the dressing room. These guys were good. I didn't care what they trashed. We paid for it. You know? It was part of our myth, and they liked the trash, so I didn't mind it myself. But as far as the drugs go, not being able to control it was death on wheels. And that was the problem. You know, wrecking a hotel room or a dressing room is not a problem. You've been around the business long enough to know that happens. That we have a lot of women out there. You know, Van Halen, you know. No.
Noel's phone just cut out on us. Coming right back with more with Noel Monk on Trunk Nation. All right, we got about 15 minutes left to go in the show, and Noel Monk has been nice enough to hang out with us the rest of the way. So many things I want to talk about here, and we're already running out of time, so hopefully we can do a part 2. Or Noel, if you ever get to back to your home turf of New York City, please come sit in with me. I'd love to dig more into this with you.
I'd love to do that, but we can come back and talk some more whenever you want.
All right. Well, with the time that we have left, there's a couple things that I need to get to. One of the major stories and one of the most astonishing things in the book, and again, everybody listening, just check out the book. It's called Running with the Devil. Noel wrote this book along with his co-author, Joe Layden. And of course, in case you just joined us, Noel was manager of Van Halen 78 through 85. So it is the glory years. It is some of the greatest records ever made. And Noel tells those stories in this book. But going back to the band's original manager, Marshall Burrell, he did something that even by today's standards, where nothing seems to be shocking, is shocking. He actually shot video of Van Halen having sex with girls and thought that would be a cool thing to show the record company. Did I read that right, Noel?
Yeah, you did. Sure surprised me. I've never seen anything as stupid as that. You know, we knew he was taking movies backstage, and he'd take them guys doing fun stuff and whatever, and I passed one room, and I saw that they were taking kind of dirty movies, and okay, boys will be boys. You know, but Marshall was taking a lot of them, and a lot more than I even knew about. I knew about a couple. And then all of a sudden, Carl Scott at Warner Brothers said, "No, I don't believe this." Well, clue me in, Carl. He said Marshall has made up DVDs, and he's shown them to Warner Brothers East Coast and West Coast, and it's a mess. You got to understand, these are secretaries who are family people. They're not used to the road. A lot of people aren't used to the road, and this may be part of the road, but they don't want to hear about it. And I don't blame them. You don't put that in someone's face. It's wrong. And when that happened, we got a huge backlash. And the lawyer, this was his death knell. At that point, most of the videos were collected, and David took most of them home. I mean, Marshall even gave me one. I looked at it. It was what it is. It was a dirty movie. But I threw it in my box and never took it out, and wouldn't even think about taking it out. No one's business now, let alone then.
And you would actually have to work. And you would actually have to work for a little while you did a lot of things to bring those secretaries, because as a very astute manager, you realized that those secretaries could be very important, where a lot of people would sort of look down on them. You actually went the extra mile, and you talk about how you worked when you became the manager to sort of recover from that by sending them limos and having them be able to bring a guest to the show and bringing them to the show in a first-class way, something that a lot of people wouldn't have necessarily thought of doing. But that was a step in sort of the recovery of ingratiating Van Halen back with those women who, in essence, were the gatekeepers to the label.
They were the gatekeepers to the VIPs. Right. They can make you or break you. And they are wonderful people. I dealt with them. You got to understand, Eddie, for years. Different labels, different secretaries. But they were all my friends. And I came into the office in the beginning of 79, and Kay, one of the senior VP secretary, came out to me and said, "No, I love you. I'm so glad you're at this band. You'll do great, but I hate your bloody band." I said, "Oh, well, they're not so bad." She said, "I saw those movies. That's disgusting." Anyhow, we were doing the California, I don't know, doing it the Coliseum show, and we were headlining. And I'm thinking, I got to bring my friends back into this band, or I got a problem. So I spoke to the guy that got our limos, Vern. I said, "Vern, I got about 10 or 15 women I got to mollify, and I want 10 or 15 white stretch limos." He says, "No problem, you got it." And the day of the show, I had them all picked up at their home with champagne and roses and food and brought to the stadium. And they had a special section that was for them. And no VIP got a free ticket. They got 2 tickets. And it really eased the tension. And all of a sudden, they didn't dislike us so much. And it was just what you had to do. Because I worked on that level.
Right. Let me ask you this before we run out of time, too, because a lot of fans have asked me about this, too. And interestingly enough, Michael Anthony was on this show not too long ago talking about this, that there seems to be a serious lack of video of Van Halen from this period. And I'm not talking about the sex videos. I'm talking about concert videos in the studio, things like that. And Michael even sort of lamented on the show. He goes, "Yeah, I wish we would have shot more. I wish we would have had more of the early concerts on video, or even us in the studio making the records. There's really not a lot." Is there stuff that maybe we're not aware of, or was there just really not time or the thought put into shooting a lot of Van Halen in their early years?
Well, basically, we did the most brilliant MTV type videos. It was David and Peter Angelis who were the real brains and genius behind those incredible videos. And you're spending $400,000 or $500,000 on a video. You know, to bring out a crew to shoot a show doesn't make any sense. Not when you're spending that kind of money on videos that my guys were making. And the videos, MTV loved us. We were the darling of MTV. Certainly not after David left. I didn't see any brilliant videos, did you?
There's a few good ones, Noel. Listen. I'm a guy that loves both versions of the band. So you're not.
I'm asking you, which ones were they?
Well, the video for "Right Now," which was a huge song, was considered a pretty cool video at the time, for sure.
I didn't see it. I see the rotations. No, I'm not against them. I'm just saying that they're different bands.
I agree 100%.
Huh?
I agree 100%. They're different bands, totally.
They're different bands, and that's why I'm not saying, Hagar is bad. I'm just saying he is a different band.
I agree completely.
Took Eddie away, and you brought in. If Hendrix was around with David, it would not be called then anything, would it? I think Hagar's a fine guy. Got no problem. He's got a beautiful voice. He's got good stage presence. He's not bad. It's just not Van Halen. It is Van Hagar. And I really have nothing against Van Hagar. I think that they deserve all the credit that you and the fans give them. I have no problem with it. I have a problem with their bickering back and forth. Who's the real 60-year-old? But it's not Eddie, my saying, anything more than they're two different bands. Get me correct.
I don't think anybody would argue with that at all. There's one thing I want to ask.
What are you saying?
I'm saying they are two different bands. I would agree with you.
All right, that's all I'm saying. One's Van Hagar, one's Van Halen, and they're not the same band.
No, I would agree completely.
How difficult is that to get?
Not at all. Not at all. Let me ask you one other thing, because there's a great piece of Van Halen folklore there was more of a point to it that you reveal in the book. The legendary Van Halen story about no brown M&Ms on the rider. There was more to that story, and there was a reason why you guys did that, which you talk about in the book. Please share that with the audience before we have to wrap up, if you can, Noel.
All right, no problem. That was really done because my tour manager came to me and said, "No, they're not reading the rider." And I said, "Okay, I'll get them to read the rider." So we got together and we put in brown M&Ms. Can't have any brown M&Ms. So we have bowls of M&Ms, and they take hours to take them out. Well, they read that rider. Because there was $1,000 fine if we found a brown M&M. And then about 2 years later, we changed it to no Coney Island whitefish. You know what that is?
Isn't that a condom?
It's a used condom that comes up on Coney Island after the weekend. And we used to call them, the kids from New York, they were Coney Island whitefish. And that really threw your promoters. We got every fish known to man except the scumbag. But anyhow, that it became legend, and so too much emphasis put on it. I didn't really push it in my book because everyone talks about it, and everyone knows a different reason why we had it.
But it was done. It was done. So simple. People would read the rider to get more attention to the rider.
Yeah. How simple is that?
Yeah, it's pretty smart. Before I have to go, Noel, have you heard from any of the guys in Van Halen since this book has come out? Do you have any contact with any of the guys anymore?
No, not really. No. Mm-mm.
When was the last time you talked to anybody from the band? Was it the day you were let go, which is in great detail in the book, but was that the last time you had contact with them?
Yeah, we couldn't come to an amicable agreement on the contract, and that was it. No more to talk about, was there?
But you had such a connection to these guys for so long. As you said, you pretty much lived with them at every show. Is there any side to you that would love to see these guys again and to talk to them again, or have you completely moved on from it?
Why? I go out to dinner with them, but, I'd be a little tense. No, I don't see any reason to, Eddie. Let them have their career. Let them have what they got. I basically wrote that book to set it straight. This is what happened. This is what they did to Michael. This is what they did. This was a paternity suit. This was the paternity insurance. I wanted people to know what the real story is before all the writers come out with their version. I mean, right. I look at my write-up, and it says I died 8 years ago. And it says I was a former policeman. It says all these things about me that never happened. And what's going to happen, Eddie, unfortunately, is you're going to get all these bullshit stories with people who were never there. And if they were, they weren't on the inside. They were way on the outside looking in. If they even went to a show, or if they even met the band once or twice. And you're going to find a lot of people you'll be interviewing who are going to be telling you stories about Van Halen and what happened. And if you just ask them, how long did you hang out with them and how many shows did you see? That may cut your show short.
Right. Well, Noel, I'm glad you wrote the book. I find the book incredibly entertaining. This is a band for all time during a period that was just absolutely incredible, that produced some amazing, timeless music that I think to this day still sounds as good as it did when I first heard it and it first came out. And I wish you luck with this book. And should you get to New York, please come sit in with us. And it's great to reconnect with you after nearly 30 years. And I wish you luck with this, man. I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Eddie, if you ever want to know something, you got my number, call me. I'll be glad to talk to you. If you want me to straighten something out, I will. But I really appreciate you. You're a fine interviewer, and you got your stuff together. And I had a good time.
I appreciate it, Nolan, and I will keep you
comfortable and happy.
Great, I'm glad, and I'll keep your number. It'll be like our Van Halen bat phone. Whenever there's a Van Halen question or dispute, we'll go to Noel Monk, we'll call you, and we'll get it straightened out, and we'll get it put to rest. So that'll be a good thing to do.
Absolutely. If you want another interview, no problem.
I appreciate it, Noel. Good luck with the book. Thanks for the time, okay?
Thank you, Eddie, and you keep up the wonderful work you do.
Appreciate it very much. Take care, okay?
Bye-bye.